everyone here today. This is Uncle Dan, physiotherapist and owner of the Flexing Physio Clinic. And also, I think he's actually low-key. He's actually a comedian for sure, because he's the funniest guy. Everyone has to follow him. He's so funny. He's my daily laugh when I have my coffee. But he's also knowledgeable, and that's why I wanted him on here today, so we can talk to Dan about doing hard things and what it does to your muscles, tendons. Nice to see you, Uncle Dan.
Yes, good to see you too, Dom.
Yeah, welcome. You're the podcast host, not me. I'm like just trying to pretend.
Thank you for thinking of me.
Yeah, of course. It was like a must. I had to ask you. But so thanks for coming on.
You had 10 physios and I was the 10th one and none of them could make it. I'm here.
10? I had like 100.
Even better.
But Dan, I know you're a rotator cuff specialist, so I don't know if you talk about other things.
I think you've pronounced it wrong. It's rotor cuff.
Rotor cuff.
Or rotor cup.
Oh, right.
That's all right. You're a psychologist. I don't expect you to know anatomy as well as I do, so it's okay.
Just the brain stuff.
Yeah, that's it. Frontal lobe.
So, man, I know we'll get into some hard stuff talking about Pete going over and doing his 1,400 kilometer run and like people wanting to do their own journeys and what that looks like in the physio world. But you're doing something pretty hard too. You're doing the High Rocks Challenge. Isn't that tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow. Nice, good memory. So
Yeah. Wow.
the last couple weeks, or sorry, I should say the last couple of months, I've been training the hardest I have ever been in my life. And it's been great, as you said, doing hard stuff and just showing up and getting the job done. I think that's been the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, and you just like entered into the running world recently too, didn't you?
Yeah.
You went from like lifting big and heavy, and now you're doing big runs and all sorts.
Some would say I'm in my hybrid running boy era.
Oh, I love it. That's great. Oh, and there'd be a bit of that in your high rock stuff, right? There's like a bit of combination of sort of CrossFit type stuff, running, is that right?
Yeah, definitely a lot more running. I think it's like 70% of the competition is running. And then the other 30 to 40% would be more your muscular endurance stuff. So in terms of my training, my background has always been in the gym, more bodybuilding, so more vein stuff, like 3 sets of 10 bicep curls. And recently I've really hit the running hard. In fact, so hard that I've run into a couple of injuries myself.
No, what's happening?
It's nothing majorly bad, but my right ankle just keeps on, every time I have a period of crappy load management, my right ankle just blows up. And actually this past week has been pretty sore, but now it's feeling back to 100, so I'm happy because High Rocks is tomorrow. But I've just had to kind of practice what I preach, but I'm not the best patient. If I can say that.
I could probably safely say most of us are not.
Yeah. We're good at giving good advice, but when it comes to ourselves, we're like, just eat Nurofen, she'll be right.
Exactly. And your clinic it's Recover, Robust, Readapt. Is that something that you're trying to bring into your High Rock stuff at the moment, or what you bring with patients?
Yeah, more so with patients, I would say, because I just like the alliteration of 3 R's. I think it's pretty cool. And my biggest thing about being a physio is that I want to just convince everyone that their body is robust. That's probably the biggest thing, is that a lot of people come see me and they've been told something in the past from another practitioner and they come in really scared and timid. We call that the glass back mentality. So I just want to show them through exercise and through education that their spine, in particular their spine, everyone freaks out about their back, that their spine is actually such a strong thing, literally holding our body up, and the discs in our spine are firmly anchored into our vertebrae, and that we're not as fragile as people think we are.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it's something that I like watching your videos to understand that. How do you navigate that with patients who come in and they do have that, do you say glass back
back mentality? Yeah.
Yes. I mean, if that's been embedded in them for a number of years and they come to you, I'd imagine it's quite frustrating, but like, what's that like? How do you get them to push through that mentality?
Well, I think with being very gentle with them, I think first and foremost, because I would say a big chunk of my day is me doing an internal eye roll or face palm. I'm sure you're the same too, but we can't physically do that in front of the patient. Otherwise they're like, this practitioner is not very empathetic. And so a lot of it is listening to them and trying to understand how they've developed these theories about their body, and then meeting them where they are. I think that's the biggest, my biggest advice is that meet them where they are and then try to lift them up. And then just use your own expertise as a physio, maybe from your own clinical experience. I like to use the days where I was back at uni when I had the pleasure of seeing a lot of dead bodies or cadavers. And I tell them, I say, look, I've actually seen a real spine before. And let me tell you, those discs, they're super robust and they ain't going anywhere. They're not slipping out anytime soon. And I tell them, like, I felt it with my hands before. And so from that experience, the patients often go, oh, yeah, this physio knows a little bit more about this than they might do. So they might just start to believe in what I say. But it's harder when they've had 10 years of other clinicians telling them one thing and then me suddenly telling them something completely opposite. So I think you've just got to take it easy. Don't try to change the world overnight, and just I think building rapport with them is fundamental. If you don't have their trust, whatever you tell them, they're not going to trust you.
Yeah, I think the whole essence there is just being able to even understand their pain or their experiences, but then trust in the practitioner. I know we've spoken about this before too, Dan, but I think if they don't have that, they're gonna do a lot of guesswork, and that's not going to help them, or they're going to have those really challenging thoughts and fight with them as well. I'm liking the new research coming out on this area, like the explain pain stuff and the DIMS and STIMS and all that sort of scope.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
the thing with explaining pain, sorry to cut you off, but
no, no.
it's such a complex area of physio and just health in general, because we know that with pain, it's not always tissue damage equals pain. You can have no presence of injury, yet you can still have pain, and that becomes really frustrating and confusing for both physio and patient. So I think you have to have enough time in your consult to be able to work through some of these tough conversations. And so when practitioners have 10 minutes with their patient, there's no way you can work through it. So a lot of it just gets brushed over. So I think having slightly longer consult times really helps the clinician not be so stressed at having to delve into everything all at once.
Would you say it's really important to do the work with a physio first? Say, for example, someone like Peter Baines over there doing for his 1400k run before he's even going. Is that important then for him to understand his body, understand his pain, know the expectations of that before he even goes over and works with a physio? Or other people thinking about doing a challenge like that?
Yeah, I think you raise a good point. It's good for them to understand if you're thinking about doing a challenge like this, and just in general, really, if you want to start running, or if you had a period of no running and then you want to start again, it's good to understand your body and what is okay or safe pain versus pain that you should give more attention to. So in some ways, there's no way you can describe you can kind of describe the good versus bad pain, but you've got to feel it to understand it, in my opinion. So, with that being said, you just have to log in the miles, get the legs turning over, and you have to experience the increase the load of running over time for you to understand. Okay, this is DOMS, or classically known as delayed onset muscle soreness, which is normal, versus okay, I'm getting some sort of a tendinopathy here, or maybe I've torn something. So you can distinguish between the two.
Yeah, that's a good point. What about the athlete who's constantly pushing the line? They're constantly trying to like push their comfort zones, and then I'm guessing their pain threshold goes up as they push it and they experience it, like you said. They then read the signs of what's, I guess, quote unquote, the good or the bad.
Yeah, that's a good question. You're right, because as you train more, and especially if you're in the gym working on building some muscles, you face pain every day. So naturally, your tolerance of pain goes up. But this is where you have to understand after you train. I think a lot of it comes after you train and how you feel. Because during training, there's adrenaline, the blood's flowing, you're distracted, you're in a loud environment most likely. So your brain's probably not thinking and fixated on the pain unless you've acutely torn something or ruptured your ACL or something like that. So a lot of the bad, quote unquote, bad pain would probably come on that evening or the next day. So
I see.
if we look at things, the most common injury we see for runners, for example, more classically known as like tendonitis or tendinopathy, and through your Achilles tendon or your patella tendon, that kneecap tendon as well. So those tendons tend to talk to us the day after we train. 24 hours, if you wake up and it's particularly sore, if you're limping, if it's sore to touch and you can see that there's swelling, that's generally not great signs. But it could also mean that your body is just having a period of adapting. So there's also a period of time where you probably don't need to worry about it too much. But if the pain lingers for more than that 3 to 4 days, and if it's waking you up of a night time and the pains are up to like an 8 or 9 out of 10, then that's definitely something's going on and you need to get it checked out.
Um, does the mind play a big role in that as well? Like, do you think that sometimes there's those signals of like, I've got pain, but I don't, like, I just want to stop? How does that come into it?
Does the mind, was that your
I
question?
should probably answer that question.
Yeah, that's like more psychology domain, right?
Why am I'm asking you the psych questions?
I think,
But
yeah, I think you're right. The mind definitely, because there's like heart knowledge versus head knowledge, right? Sometimes even they have pain, but they wanna push through because comp is next week. So that was definitely for me. But I'm a bit of a big sook, so I had pain and immediately I stopped my running and I was very quick to pull back. But you could be a bit more of a beast compared to me, and even though with the presence of a swollen ankle and sore tendons, yet you still turn up to your training session, you still push hard, and then you find that the pain just lingers and or you make it worse. So yeah, the mind definitely has a huge play here.
maybe you do practice what you preach more than you give yourself credit for then. You slow down a bit.
Yeah, if my patient was also a big sook, I think definitely.
What if your patient was, like, on that note, what if your patient was someone like Peter Baines or like the likes of Ned Brockman and people like that, where you know, as the physio, you're in the physio shoes, you know that they're hurting themselves, they're injuring themselves, but they have this big goal, it means everything to them.
Yeah.
Like, how does that sit? Obviously, there's ethics, duty of care, but then there's the patient
Yep.
in the center, right?
100,
How does that work?
100%. So part of my practice, a big part of my practice is I ask the patient what their goals are. So I say to them, what do you want to get out of today's consult? And I also ask them, what are your goals? So to boil physiotherapy down into a nutshell, I would say our job is to figure out the patient's goal and where they currently are, and we will need to bridge the gap, whatever way that is, whether it's through strength training, whether it's through taping, load management, whatever. Our job is to bridge the gap between their current status and their goal. So if their goal is to run 1,400 kilometers across Thailand, then that's our job, is to get them there and get them through the line. And you mentioned Ned Brockman before, his only physio, I believe, Alex Bell from the running room. I haven't had a chance to sit and talk with him on my own podcast. I'd love to be able to do that one day. His physio wrote this awesome article online because physios all want to know how the physio for Ned Brockman got him through the Perth to Sydney run. And he wrote this amazing article. And basically, the sane physio or the general physio would probably, if they see Ned Brockman rock up to their clinic, the first advice is, let's get you to stop running and deload. But if that's not an option, then what's the next best option? And Alex, he just does that so well. So they use heaps of tape. They work really closely with sports doctors. They needed to get scans. I think they used a bunch of different AFOs, like ankle foot orthotics, just to help him pick his legs back up. So, you just got to think outside the box, and which is a subtle plug for yourself.
We didn't even pre-organize.
No, we did it. Yeah. You can pay me later.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think a lot of the times, if your patient who sits in front of you is not the classic or the typical patient, you've really just got to try different things, and you've got to go real left wing and just get them through the line, whatever it may be.
Hearing you say that, I can see where those words like the recover, robust, readapt your model there comes into that too. Yeah, because it is just constant readaptation, I guess, is
Yeah,
what you're saying.
both as the clinician, because I often describe us as a chameleon. Same with yourself,
Mm,
like we just have to change our approach, change our
mm.
skin according to the patient in front of us. Like I tell people, in a day's of worth of patients, I think I go through 20 different personality changes, just like that. You just got to switch.
They always keep you on your toes. Oh,
Absolutely.
so I don't imagine Pete at the moment be having to readapt all the time. I know for him he was on a main highway and he's meant to keep going. He gets to this point where there's just these steep stairs out of nowhere, and he's there having to climb those stairs, and it's things that you just don't expect, and you're in pain, and you just got to adapt to. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I guess what's the
Sink
alternative
or
of
swim, right?
yeah, yeah, or David Goggins would be the adapt or die.
Yeah, exactly. Literally, yeah.
On that question, how would you seek balance in that then? You're saying you'd adapt it, you'd work with them, you'd be a bit left field, you'd come have some creativity there to help manage their goals, the patient goals, and say as safe as possible. How did they then balance that process? Listening to the body signs would be one of them, but is there anything else they can do to balance keeping themselves safe but also trying to hit that big goal?
Yeah, there's two different cues. The first one being subjective cues. So like how do they feel on the day? For example, if they just wake up and they for some reason they didn't have a good night's rest before, they had like 3-4 hours sleep. So they wake up feeling really under the weather. That's a subjective cue, so that's what they feel. But then you've also got objective cues as well. So one of just to throw an example out there, if you're looking at the barbell back squat, you can look at the bar speed. So from the speed from which the bar's at the very bottom position to when the person squats back up. And you can look at the bar speed. So a lot of people these days, they'll assess the bar speed and then from the bar speed, they can go, okay, this athlete's under a bit of fatigue. So we're going to reduce the load that day to hopefully reduce the risk of injury. There's two differences. There's subjective and objective cues. I think you've got to try and marry the two of them together to get the best outcome for that training session.
Yeah, okay, great. You mentioned Alex earlier. He is the physio too of Pete. So yeah, there we go. All kind of interlinked somehow.
Look at that.
Yes, he's doing it via telehealth, but he's got a team around him, and he's got like a nurse, for example, as partner, and like a whole bunch of people coming on board to support him.
Beautiful.
That's what it is. Is there's that observation sort of going back to him, but it would be hard. I'd say being at distance.
Yeah, definitely. And you can never get it 100% right. So that's where you need clear communication from both ends. More so from Pete, obviously, because he's the person actually going through it. But I think if stopping is not an option, then of course he's going to feel like crap after he runs consecutively over many days. Of course his ankles are not going to feel pristine. So yeah, they'll just have to manage it the best as they can.
Yeah. Are there any qualities you can see in people that you work with, like across the board, for people who do hard things or push the limits? Are there particular key qualities that you see in these people that they have, like resilience?
Craziness, is that a quality?
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think the word that comes to mind is grit. Grit.
Yeah.
I think having that grit is so underrated, and it goes through any facet of life, really. I think if you have enough grit and the ability to stay in a sucky position for a long time and just put your head down and get to work, eventually there's the lights at the end of the tunnel. And whether it be from a business point of view or from a running point of view, if you've got that ability to endure the suck, then your chances of succeeding is more than the person next to you who quits. There's a quote I love, which is, in a race, you don't have to finish strong, but you need to finish well.
Yeah.
As long as you complete it and finish it, that's the key. Don't quit at the first sign of pain or first sign of something that doesn't go your way.
Yeah, there's a lot of that heart head sort of thing going on there. Hey?
Yeah. And just, I think depends on which voice is louder that day will eventually be the winner.
Yeah, I think so too. Sometimes you probably got to yell in your own head to get over that voice up there. Sometimes,
Yeah, for sure.
even if you look like a bit strange when you run.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like tomorrow for High Rocks, there's going to be a lot of head noise.
I was just about to ask you that because I mean, going from not being a runner and then going into running after a long time, anyone who's run can know that that's hard.
Yeah.
That's when you need that grit.
And it's also for high rocks specifically, it's like running when your legs, you've just done like 80 meters of lunges and then you got to go back and run again. I think that's the hardest part is the running on really compromised, fatigued legs. So it'll be interesting to see how I go tomorrow. But anyway,
Yes, I'll be rooting for you. We all will be.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thinking of you for sure. On that note, what about like proactive strategies like prehab, rehab, not prehab and rehab,
Yeah.
prehab,
Prehab.
prehab. Gosh, I know all the physio terms pretty well.
Yeah.
Um,
Obviously.
um, are there are there any go-to strategies that you have that are sort of proactive for people who are wanting to get into ultra running or active strategies people can use?
Yeah. This is a great question. And I feel like there's a lot of myths surrounding this question as well. People have a lot of preconceived ideas. So it'd be good to kind of break down a few.
Yeah, sure.
One of the questions I get asked all the time is how can I prevent injuries? Or how can I bulletproof my knees so that I'd never get injured? And I said to them, if I knew the answer, I'd be out of the job. Like if we knew the
Yeah,
answer, there would be no
true.
physios or
Yeah.
chiros or myos or whatever. So this is a really big question, but I like this principle called the KISS principle, which is KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I guess because I'm a bit of a simpleton, so I like to keep things nice and easy. The very first thing that a lot of people overlook is the sleep.
Hmm.
So simply just sleep enough, and that will reduce your risk of injury. There's a study which showed if you consecutively get less than 7 hours of sleep a night for more than like 14 days or something, your risk of injury increases by 1.7.
Whoa.
So that's something that everyone does, as in sleep. So if you just sleep a little bit more, that can actually help reduce your risk of injury. So that's number one. The second thing is, are they doing some sort of a strength training and plyometric program? A lot of people are doing a lot of runners are doing a strength training program, which is fantastic, but a lot of them who do strength training are not doing plyometrics. And what plyometrics are is like you're jumping, your more explosive type exercises. And there's another great study out there which showed that if people did more plyometrics, it can reduce the risk of ACL. So this is more specific to ACL knee injuries. It can reduce the risk of a ACL injury by 60%.
Whoa.
Yeah. So
That's almost numbers.
yeah, it's crazy. So just by doing some jumping into your strength program, it's literally reducing the risk of injury. So why wouldn't you jump around and do some plyometrics, right? And following on from that, some of the more basic stuff like, are you eating enough? Are you fueling your body? And this is definitely a dietitian realm, but just to throw some stuff out there, like, are you having enough protein? Are you having enough carbs, fats, all those nutrients? Are you having enough to fuel the demands of your training, whether it be running 5Ks a day or you're training for a marathon or whatever? Fueling is so underrated. So that's why I always like working with dietitians to help the person in front of us. And the other thing is, are you drinking enough water? Are you staying hydrated, electrolytes, all that good stuff? And then last but not least, are you managing your stress well? Training is a form of stress, but more so like mental stresses, like family life, work life, anything could increase your mental stresses, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so
Hmm.
those are the main things. I reckon if you nail all of them, you're in a pretty good spot.
I like how simply you put it, and there a lot of those like that basic needs, right? Do you get many people come and they're trying to work on things that are maybe a little bit more, I don't know if lack of a better word,
Useless.
but more on that sort of advanced, like, or gimmicky level, but maybe they haven't nailed the bottom level, like these basic needs that you're
Yes.
talking about?
So the way I describe it, I love analogies, by the way.
Love it.
And I like food. So a lot of my analogies are food related. But I,
That's
I
so good.
talk about building, or not building, baking a cake rather. So when you make a cake, you need the non-negotiable ingredients like your flour, your water, your butter, the things that actually make the cake. And then you have the things that you put on top of the cake, like your
Mm.
icing, your cherries, your Thousand Islands, whatever your chocolate chips, whatever you want to put on your cake. So the things that make the cake, that's what I describe as things like your sleep, your strength training, your plyometrics, your nutrition, your stress levels. And then the things on top of the cake, those are more your gimmicky stuff that you can or you don't have to include. So things, just to throw some stuff out there, like ice baths, saunas, theraguns, cupping, needling, all those things that are more you can do with or without.
Yeah, okay. Yep. And does that make those marginal differences? So if we're talking more elite athletes, is that going to be more important to them because it makes those sort of marginal time differences and things like that?
Yeah, some people, depending who you speak to, some high level athletes, they will swear by the ice bath they had last night before they just
Mm-hmm.
ran their world record.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to go to them and say, well, actually, the research shows that ice baths don't really do what you claim? No, you're not. You're just probably going to be like, mate, that's fantastic. Your ice, maybe the ice froze something and you just became faster. But that's fantastic. And for a lot of
Yeah.
these people, they do all these things to mentally prepare themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a little bit of a tangent, but I know Olympic weightlifters, they are notoriously known to have a really long warm up routine before they get into their main sets. It could last as long as 30 to 45 minutes, just working on individual muscles, warming them up, or rolling this part of their lat, just doing all sorts. But for them, it's like it's mentally preparing them for the work ahead. And if it helps them focus, if it helps them get ready for the task, well, then if they perform better, then why not? It's such a low risk treatment. So go for it. I don't care.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of like whatever works for them.
Going back to my cake analogy, which I should trademark because I think I've
I feel
invented
like you
it.
should.
But
You need to.
going back to my cake analogy, if you have a boring ass cake, it's kind of like, oh yeah, look, it will keep me alive, but it's not going to taste very nice. Chuck on some icing and make it taste really nice. Why not, right? It's not detrimental, so do it.
What's the coolest icing you've ever seen? What, or like the wackiest one? What's the weirdest thing someone's done that's like maybe not even evidence based, but it helps?
Like all of them, which is not really answering your question. But I reckon ice bath. I reckon ice bath is pretty hectic. Just thinking about dipping your whole body into ice. And I know some countries like Russia where they've got access to cold weather. Some people will do ice bath every single morning, and for them it's more like a mental discipline of doing hard things. And I'm like,
Mhm.
that's actually that makes sense to me.
Yeah,
Going into an ice bath first thing in the morning, you obviously don't want to do it, but yet you still do it because it's hard.
yeah.
I think that can really train a bit of mental toughness. But then my gripe is when people claim for it to do other stuff that really just
Mm.
aren't backed. And it's like, okay.
That whole magic potion stuff when people market things.
Yeah.
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 Are there any common mistakes that you find people doing on that line? Are there things that people do that maybe are not helping their case or maybe injuring them?
Yeah, like the other way?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that people do that will negatively affect them. But I think just going back to our previous points, I think when people focus too much on these potentially ineffective modalities like your ice baths and saunas and all that, is when people hyper focus on them and then they ignore the rest of the cake. I think that's one of the common mistakes. Another mistake that I thought of is in the presence of an injury. So when someone is training, like they're an athlete, but they've broken their leg, for example, sometimes they throw the baby out with the bathwater and then they just end up not training because they're depressed or they just go, oh, what's the point? I'm not going to train because my leg's broken. What I tell people is you've still got your upper body. You can still go to the gym and do upper body. There's so many other benefits of training rather than just having big legs. You can still keep the training up and keep the cardio system going. And we also know that there's really good crossover effects. So if your right leg's broken and you still continue to exercise your left leg, well, then evidence shows that the crossover, you can still get strength gains and muscular gains on, maybe not gains, but you can maintain your muscle on your injured side.
So is that just kind of coming back to simply doing what you can do rather than sort of focusing on what you can't do if you're injured?
Yep. Yep. But it's really hard. And I know I read the other day, big chunk of people who suffer an ACL tear, I think 40 something % of them get into depression, which I understand because it's just their sports have just been taken away from them just like that. So it's hard to continue training when you don't feel like it, you know?
Absolutely. I've had a few ACL clients this week, actually.
Awesome.
And I do believe it needs to be normalized, definitely getting help. From a multidisciplinary approach with them is really important, so they feel they've got their team around them. But yeah, they're really good points. I love that cake analogy, and I think like anyone listening on definitely sort of take that in and think about that and be real with yourself if you are actually putting the ingredients probably in the right order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't put the icing in first and then put the flowers. Like, what's going on?
I'm going to quickly go patent that idea before you, I reckon.
All right, I'll give it to you. You're all right.
Oh,
I'm too nice.
That's too easy. That was too easy. I was trying to put up a fight here.
Nah, it's a Friday afternoon.
You're like, you can have it, Dom. Whatever. What about time? Like for people who are time poor and they've got to do a lot of training? I know Ironman, for example, Ironman athletes, they're a bit on the cray side.
Yeah.
How do they fit the time in to like actually do the physio, plyometrics, all that sort of stuff? Those gold nuggets you gave us.
Yeah. Sometimes I agree. It's really hard. That's one of the most common pushbacks is I just don't have time. And some people, you're like, do you really not have time? Or are you just saying that because you'd rather scroll on your phone for 2 hours?
Yeah.
But some people, I'm assuming that they literally just don't have time. The body, again, is very robust. It's very adaptive. So I think you can still get away with doing your Ironman training, for example, and not doing a single shred of strength training. I reckon you can get away with it. For example, this is a real life example. My wife, she is someone like that, except she doesn't not have time. She just doesn't listen to her husband. But that's a whole nother, maybe we need some relationship counseling there.
We should book it next week. It's all good.
Yeah, sounds good. So she is a really keen runner. So all she does is she runs. But she doesn't do any strength training. And yet she has not had any injury in the last 5 years of doing this. So, I mean, that's kind of counterintuitive to what we've been talking about, right? Like having to do your plyometrics and your strength training to reduce the risk of injury. But I think because the body is so specific and so adaptive, her body probably just got really, really, really good at running. Would it then be safe for me to go, you know what, if my wife can get away and not get injured and not strength train, therefore I'm going to tell everyone, don't worry about strength training. I'm not going to do that because we know for a fact strength training can improve your body's capacity to accept loads. So of course I'm going to advise everyone to do their strength work. But if, as to answer your question, if someone just doesn't have the time, it's okay. I think there's a chance they can still get away with it. So in that population, my best advice is keep running until you can't, or keep doing your stuff until you get injured, until you can't.
There's someone in my running group, and she has run, I can't remember how many years now, at minimum 5K every single day.
Wow.
Yeah. I did park run with her last week, and she goes and smashes it. She wins it, and then she'll go the next day and do like a 30K. Yeah. But she hasn't had injuries.
Yeah.
It's been years of her doing that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think as long as she gradually built into this 5K every day, and not she didn't have like a 5-year stint of doing nothing and then suddenly every day she runs 5K. I think as long as you gradually increase the load through your body's great at adapting. So that's amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome, hey? Yeah, but then there'll be someone else in the crew that's doing all the right things and they're getting injured. Yeah.
Tough pities, bad luck.
It is, eh? It's just probably quite individual, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what would your advice be for someone? Because it sounds like plyos and strengths like really important there for
Mm.
preparing. Would you advise people to book in with like say physio, or would it be going to a PT at the gym?
Mm.
For someone who doesn't really know that stuff, what would their first step be?
I would say book in with a physio every day for 12 years. Specifically the flexing physio, make me as rich as possible so I can retire at 30. Nah, just jokes.
And still get the passive income from
Yeah,
it too.
that's right. 6 figures, 6 figures on the weekly.
Great advice.
I forgot your question.
Lose your house, lose your car, lose your kids, like, lose everything to go to physio.
That's right.
Yeah, no, my questions like, what would the first step be to go do plyos and strength training and stuff for someone who's wanting to go down that path and they're inspired by this conversation?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think the first step is to, if you're really, really lost, I think it's always better to ask for help. So, in terms of who you book in with, it honestly doesn't really matter. I think someone who, A, has a background in running is really important. B, someone who is qualified to give advice. So maybe not just your mate that is good at running. Maybe they will feel that they are qualified to give advice. But I think if you pay for the advice, you receive it a lot better and you go in with like a willingness to learn. But if it's just your mate who's a good runner, maybe you don't take them as seriously. So I think there is merit in paying to get a service and paying for objective advice from someone you don't know personally. I think there's definitely merit in that.
Yep.
The other thing is definitely have good programming, so good load management. Again, in a nutshell, our job as physios is to try to figure out load management for someone. Because if you have crappy load management, that increases your risk of getting injured because your body just doesn't have the time to adapt. So again, working with someone with a running background who can help you program your running throughout the week. And if they can program your strength training too, that's even better. That's two birds, one stone. And another tip from me is to actually download apps like Strava because it's free. You can track your runs and you can see your running over the past like month or year, depending how long you've had it for. And it's a good way to check your load management. If you're getting these big spikes up and down, your body and your tendons, it generally doesn't like anything too drastic, whether it's too drastically reduction in load or too drastically increase in load. So those up and down spikes, your body won't tend to love it. So you want like a gradual increase over the weeks.
Awesome advice. I wish I spoke to you earlier about this because I went to my physio. He's a good mate of mine now, Geordie at Back to Bounce.
Yeah.
And I went there and I said, Geordie, can you program me to do a 50K trail run? And he's like, when's that? I'm like, in a few months. And he's like, oh yeah, cool. And I said, but the problem is I've got like a lot of pain in my shins. And he's like, okay. And he touched it and I was like just jumping out of my skin. And he's like, we might get them scanned. And I had like 3 fractures and I kept just running. And he said, well, you're not in pain. I said, yeah, every time I come back from a run, I'd be crying. But then I'm trying to say, push through it. Don't be a wuss. Like, get it done. You can do hard things. Back to the point before, we can push ourselves so much to want to do something and then hurt ourselves. But then I think to your point now, his programming is what saved me. Like, I'd actually have to be honest and say, no, I'm not doing this 50K. And also now I've got a program to do what you just said, like that gradual come back to running safely.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it doesn't produce the best stories. How good would it be to be able to tell your mates that you did that 50K, whatever? But I think in the long term, and we're talking about long term here, yes, you probably can complete it. You'll be in pain and it's a great story, but long term, you're running yourself into, and you said you had 3 fractures. Were they stress fractures or proper breaks?
They were stressies, but they were definitely going to go that way. Yeah.
Good job, Geordie. Good pickup.
Yeah, he did good. Yeah, definitely he did good.
You would have been his case of the week when they all have their meeting.
I think so. Would you say that just that sort of gradual, consistent incline into the hard things is that sort of the answer to that?
I think so. And again, I'll go back to one of my previous points, which is keep it simple, stupid. And nowadays, unfortunately, simple isn't sexy, and simple doesn't sell well. So that's why these gurus online, they are often saying really controversial things and just to get attention and to sell their program or whatever they're trying to sell. If it works for you, that's great. I'll shake your hand and say good job. But for a lot of people, they'll look at these gurus or even fitness influencers on Instagram or YouTube. They'll get that sudden burst of motivation, and then they'll go and start running 10K every day. And then because their body simply just isn't ready to accept the load, they run into an injury. And then this injury, if you're young, fit, you can probably bounce back reasonably fast. But if you're someone who's in their middle age, maybe postmenopausal, or for men, some hormonal problems or diabetic or whatever, you're not going to be able to bounce back as fast. And what I'd hate to see is someone who is keen to exercise and keen to get back into shape, and then they have an injury which stops them from doing the thing that they enjoy, and then they just throw the baby out with the bathwater and then continue on their negative spiral, eating pies, smoking, gambling, blah, 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 whatever it may be. And then just, their health goes downhill. So yeah, keep it simple. That's my best advice to people.
That's so good. And, it puts it in perspective, all the hard work. We're watching all the awesomeness of Pete every day going and accomplishing this great goal, and he's running huge distances across Thailand in the heat and all the adversity over there, all the challenges. But I think it's important that everyone listening remembers a lot of training has gone into this. He's not just jumped over there and just decided, I'm going to just wing it and see if I can do it. He's got a team, he's got his food, he's got Matty Abel on his side, he's had the sports psychology work, Alex, the physio there, he's also done a lot of hard things in his life, and he's equipped his body, and he's done it the right way. So I think that's probably really important, because we get very inspired by these things. They're pretty cool.
They are.
Yeah.
And it's just looking at Ned Brockman and what he's done too. He's obviously someone who's had a lot of running training and running background, and yet every time he does one of these challenges, at the end, he can hardly walk. His body's broken, literally just battered and broken. So even with the history of training, your body can still break. But the awesome thing is that the body recovers itself. It's really good at healing itself. And I often tell people Wolverine, the Marvel character, he gets shot and then the bullet just pops out because he heals, he regenerates. I tell my clients, I say, the body is kind of like that, but if you're a kid, it happens a lot faster compared to when you are in your 50s. I say, when you're in your 50s, you're like old Wolverine. You still heal, but just heaps slower. And they go, oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Out of its law before you can get going.
The bullet takes 3 business days to pop out.
Yeah. So Pete he's middle aged, and he's over there doing that. It's like, happy birthday, Pete! I know it's your birthday today.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and he's doing all that. But Uncle Dan, it's been super, super cool having you on. Is there anything I sort of failed to ask, or is there anything else on that note that you want to add there, or do you think we kind of covered?
No, I think we covered it all. So you've been a great host. You should do this more often.
Really?
Yeah, but I really appreciate it, and I'll send you the invoice.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan, for your time today. I really appreciate it. There's been heaps of really good knowledge there that you've shared. I've taken a lot from that. I'm sure a lot of the listeners have too today. For those wanting to know more about what Pete's doing, jump on to Peter Baines on Instagram or Hands Across Water and follow his journey. He is over halfway now to his goal of getting $1 million for kids over in Thailand. Jump on. You can just donate your coffee order if you wanted to that. And guys, please follow Flexing Physio, because Dan is hilarious, as I mentioned. He'll make your day every day with his comedy and his information. That's super invaluable. So yeah, thanks again, Dan, for your time.
Thanks, Dom. I appreciate it.